Is it on now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome. I'm glad to see us here tonight on this hot June day. Anyway, thank you for coming. Let me call the meeting to order of the Wednesday, June 5th, 2024 SFO Airport Community Roundtable at 7:06. We're meeting in hybrid session today at the David J. Chukuti Community Room in Millbrae and remotely via Zoom. Joining us today are our staff to the roundtable: Kathleen Wentworth, our roundtable coordinator; Diane Estopono, our roundtable administrative secretary; Ted Gonzalez, our planning department administrative secretary, assisting for tonight. Welcome. And Jean Rendell, our aviation technical consultant from HMM&H. So I'd like to welcome all of you. Before we move on, though, we do have other participants or guests here tonight, and I'll ask Kathleen if she could please introduce them. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I think we should probably start out with the San Francisco Airport contingent, who is here in full force. Bert, could I ask you to introduce all of your team?
Thank you. I'd be happy to. Let me first start with, obviously, Doug Yackel, who's sitting in for Ivar Satero. We have Kevin Bowman, who's our finance chief. We have, from our noise insulation program, Luis Moreno, Wim Wong, and then from the noise office, we have David Ong and Anthony Carpinotti.
Thank you. Diane, do you have a list of the participants online? Is there anyone else in the room that we've missed? I think they're all from San Francisco. Diane, do you have the list of the participants that are online, our guests?
Yes, we'll be sharing that shortly.
Oh, great.
Want me to announce?
Yeah, would you? You've got them all there?
We have a member from, we have Town of Westside, Paul Gould online. We have Martha Bergen, Steve Alonso online.
I'm here, present. I'm connecting. I don't know, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Ms. Berrigan, we do. We're just going to introduce the guests who are not on the roundtable right now, and then we'll come back and take the official roll.
And one more side Chin.
Welcome, Ms. Chin.
Good evening.
Is there anyone else we've missed, other than our roundtable members, of course? No?
Anybody from the county of San Mateo? Anybody from the county of San Mateo, Kathleen?
I don't see anyone here.
Don't see anybody yet. Okay. So with that, let's move on. Before we take roll call, let me first of all make a comment.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
May I just, could you put that back up, just so I could, that last list of people? I saw that Glenn Morris from United Airlines was on with us this evening, and I'm not sure if, not sure if, in addition to Glenn, if Ashley Zaya is going to join us, but we'll let you know if she does later. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome. With that, let's move into the next segment of the meeting, which is, again, before we take roll call, let me just note that as a reminder, tonight's meeting will be a hybrid meeting with members attending in person and in the public. You're welcome to, the public is always welcome to attend in public or via Zoom, and many are participating remotely tonight. For those attending remotely, we continue to use an enhanced Zoom feature, and we will periodically show the names of anybody attending on Zoom on the screen. The list of names will display the list will display the names, but not the email addresses entered by each person when they're signing into the Zoom meeting. I will now move into the roll call. I will note that in addition to it being a summer meeting, which is always a challenge, we do have a number of people ill tonight, a couple people with COVID and a couple people with allergies. And there are some who are unfortunately not able to attend because they are taking care of, they're the caregivers for others in the family who are ill. So we do not have a quorum. We may, I'm just advised. But if we don't, we're going to move forward with the meeting anyway. There's only one item tonight that would require a vote, and that could be deferred if necessary. So with that, let's take the roll call. Kathleen?
Thank you. City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors? No response. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office? No response. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission?
Here, Doug Yakel.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors?
Martha?
Thanks.
Okay, yes, that's good, thank you.
City of Foster City?
Sam Hindi, present.
Thank you. City of Half Moon Bay? Town of Hillsborough?
Present.
City of Menlo Park? City of Menlo Park, no response. City of Millbrae?
Angelina Cahalan, present.
Thank you. City of Pacifica? Town of Portola Valley? Portola Valley, no response.
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Talk about timing. City of Portola Valley is here. City of Redwood City? City of Redwood City? City of San Bruno? City of San Bruno, Ms. Alvarez? City of San Carlos? City of San Mateo?
Rich Hedges, pinch hitting for Rob Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Hedges. City of South San Francisco?
Margaret Gallus here.
Thank you, sir. Town of Woodside, and Paul is... Thank you. We have you present. We'll just ask you, Chair will ask you a question or two. So for Ms. Berrigan and Mr. Gold. Ms. Berrigan is
Okay, did you-
childcare.
Okay, before we acknowledge or check whether or not we have a quorum, for the two members who are participating via Zoom, the rules require that I ask you a couple questions that you can verify too for us to move forward with you in order to vote. They're simple questions. Number one, are you participating remotely due to caregiver responsibilities or contagious diseases? I believe you are both, right? Yes. Acknowledge, okay. You are going to use video and audio, and you understand that you cannot take any action if the connection is interrupted. So if your connection is interrupted, you'll have to pass on any discussion until we come back on. And the last question is,
Right.
are there any adults with you in the room, anyone age 18 or over in the room with you?
No.
Hearing none. Okay, with that, you are quote-unquote certified. So welcome. I appreciate you making the effort to join, and I'm sorry you're not feeling well. But I do appreciate the
Thank
fact
you.
that you're here. Yeah. Kathleen, do we have a quorum?
It looks like we have 12 representatives, and... Oh. I'm sorry?
Christine just came up from Pacifica.
Oh, Christine Bowles. City of Pacifica.
I'm present. I'm caregiving for my mother who just moved in with me a couple of days ago, so I was just going to join as an attendee, but if you need me as a part of the quorum, I can do that.
Yes. Yes.
I believe we do. We need 13, and you're the 13th, so welcome.
Well, there you go. You've got me then.
Christine, I do have a couple questions I need to ask you for the record for participation. One is you're participating remotely due to caregiver responsibilities or contagious illness. I believe that's the case. You've already indicated that. You're going to use video and audio. You understand you cannot take any action if you lose your connection while you're gone. And last but not least, are there any adults with you age 18 or older in the room with you?
My mother.
Your mother, okay, and what's her name? Well, that's okay, I don't need her name, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, okay. Thank you. In that case, let the record show that we have a quorum. We have 13 members present, and we can move forward. So again, I thank you all for attending on this hot, hot day in the middle of summer, but we do appreciate it here. And we do have a couple of interesting topics tonight. I think it's going to be worth your while to have a discussion over them. Next item on the agenda is the public comment not on the agenda. At this point in time, we will take comment from any members of the public for any items that are not on the agenda. We will have an opportunity to have public comment on items on the agenda later, but if there's any members of the public in chambers or on Zoom that wish to speak on items not on the agenda, if you could please, in a minute, Diane will tell you the process and we'll recognize you then. So Diane, if you could please.
For those attending the meeting in person, please submit your speaker slips located by the entrance.
Sorry about that. Let me repeat those instructions. For those attending the meeting in person, please submit your speaker slips located at the back table to me here, and you may speak at the podium. If you are attending on Zoom video conference, we'll use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comment. During the general public comment period, I will ask those members of the public who wish to speak to comment during the general public comment period. Please use the raise hand feature to speak on any of the agenda items. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Do we, before we move on, let the record show that Linda Wolin from the County of San Mateo has joined us. So welcome, Linda. Thank you. With that, do we have any members in chambers that wish to speak? We have someone. Have you filled the card out, sir? Okay, if you can give it to Diane, and the podium's right up there. And there should be a clock right behind me to help you measure time there. Right behind my head here, I think. Right up here.
Yes. Okay, one moment while we share the timer. And we have one speaker, Mr. Remy Tan.
Hello, Remy Tan.
Let me start the timer for you. I'm sorry.
Okay. You good?
Give me 1 second. Okay. Do you see it? Here. Oh, let me restart that. Okay, thank you. You may begin.
So, Remy Tan, I'm an architect and a resident of Pacifica, north part of Pacifica. And I would like to comment, the overnight flyovers in Pacifica is getting worse and worse. We have flights, every few minutes going, from 10 p.m. all the way into about 3 a.m. and sometimes even later. And, I've spoken several times about this subject, and nothing ever seems to be done. It seems like, speaking with Kathleen Wentworth and some of the other members, that we really need to urge the Roundtable to look at having a curfew for SFO between the hours of 10 a.m. and it's at 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Similar to the other airports like San Diego, San Jose, and John Wayne airports in highly urbanized area. Another possibility we can do is, I heard there was talk about a new link bridge between Oakland Airport and San Francisco Airport, which would be great if we can have a high-speed rail connection between the two airports, and then the runway of Oakland Airport, which is a land over water and take off over water, could possibly be used to reopen for later night flights, so long as they don't disturb people in Bay Farm Island and surrounding communities. But it would definitely help increase the capacity of the airport and tie both airports together, and deal with the expanding need for air travel. So hopefully SFO and Oakland can work together. I think Nancy Pelosi was talking about that new link bridge in one of her newsletters. So hopefully, the federal government and FAA and the airports can work together to kind of have a permanent resolution to the flyover problem that affects us in North Pacifica, Daly City, South City, and Brisbane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Again, because it's an item not on the agenda, we're not able to comment on it during the meeting. But if you could contact either Kathleen or myself or some member, we can chat with you afterwards and provide some more data for you. Are there other members in chambers that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any members of the public on Zoom, that wish to speak on items not on the agenda?
There is none on Zoom at this time.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment on items not on the agenda, and we'll move to the consent calendar and the setting of the agenda. Find my notes here. If you can refer to the agenda, the consent calendar has the approval of the minutes from February 7th and April 3rd. I will note there's one correction on one of the minutes. I forget which one it is. April meeting, there was a misspelling of Darlene Yaplee. So if you want to correct the spelling of her last name, is Y-A-P-L-E-E. Other than that, I don't think we've been notified of any advance. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. For the February 7th meeting, it said South City Representative Mark Adiego, but it's supposed to be me. It's okay. We get confused all the time. Yeah, February.
February.
It's okay.
Mark, we'll correct the records. So which one of you are insulted and which one of you are complimented? So, okay, we'll correct that. Second correction from February 7th. Are there any other comments or corrections from members of the minute first on the minutes, the director reports to the budget on the consent agenda, and we'll get to those in just a minute, or excuse me, other minutes? If not, are there any members of the public that wish to indicate a correction to the minutes? Seeing no hands raised, none on Zoom?
None on Zoom as well.
Okay. Are there any member comments on consent items 1, 2, or 3? Hearing none, we'll take a motion to approve consent items 1, 2, and 3 and setting the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, who made the motion? Okay. Mr. Hedges, I'm not sure if you can make a motion since I don't think you're a formal member of the committee. So my apologies, but could someone else make the motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the
Okay.
agenda and consent items.
And I'll
And we
second
have
it.
the second. Okay, great. Sorry about that, sir. Yeah. Okay, do we have any comments on the agenda items, consent agenda items? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we have members on Zoom. I'm required to take a roll call vote. So Kathleen, if you could please do so.
For point of information,
Yes, please.
so am I going to be able to vote on anything?
No, I'm afraid not, sir.
It's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, but there's only one item for vote, really, but,
Does that hurt our quorum?
Does that?
what is our quorum? I thought we were over the quorum. It will hurt the quorum. We're one member short of the quorum. So the one action for item tonight will not be able to take action item, but we will discuss it.
Point of information, that's exactly why Mr. Newsom asked me to come, to make sure we had a quorum. So
I appreciate that. Unfortunately, the only people allowed by the bylaws are members or alternates.
I understand.
Yeah, but I appreciate you being here, sir. I'm just sorry. Okay.
The alternate. Oh, Lisa. Lisa, so I turned it.
Let's take the vote. Let's see. I've been advised by our coordinator we may not be allowed to vote on the consent agenda either. So we may have to pass on that action item. I don't think there's any controversial, but we'll move on and approve the minutes at the next meeting then. Okay. Are there any comments by any of the members of the membership? Okay, this is a problem I guess we get into at the summer meetings, particularly with the illnesses we're having this year. With that, let's move to the regular agenda. The item on the regular agenda is the discussion of the 24-2025 work plan, which begins on your packet on page 34 with an overview staff memo followed by a detailed discussion. As I said earlier, we are allowed to discuss it. We're not allowed to vote on it. So the vote will be deferred until the August meeting. Okay? Okay. We're recounting, I apologize. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 and 3 on is 13. That's a majority. Okay, I apologize. Christina, you have your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just had a thought
You
that
got what?
you weren't counting me because I didn't have my video on.
Okay, you are now counted. We have recounted. We're obviously having a math deficiency here, but we do meet the quorum. So we do have a quorum, so I thank you very much. So don't go away.
Okay.
So with that, we have had a motion and a second on the consent calendar. We are going to take a roll call vote. So Kathleen, if you could please do so.
City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office, no response. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Yes.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, no response. CCAC Airport Land Use Commission. Yes. Town of Atherton, no response. City of Belmont.
Aye.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Abstain, I was not present.
Thank you. Town of Colma, no response. City of Daly City, no response. City of East Palo Alto,
Yes.
thank you. City of Foster City,
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay. Town of Hillsborough,
Yes.
City of Menlo Park. City of Millbrae,
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Aye.
Oh, wait, did I miss City of Pacifica?
You did. And yes.
Yes, thank you. Town of Portola Valley.
Aye.
City of Redwood City, no response. City of San Bruno, no response. City of San Carlos, no response. City of South San Francisco.
Aye.
Thank you. Town of Woodside.
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous with one abstention.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. So let's move on to the item of business, and that is the first item on the regular agenda is item number 4. This will require an action item, does require a vote, and it deals with the approval of the work plan for the fiscal year FY 24-25, year beginning July 1, 2024, ending June 30th, 2025. In your packet, beginning on page 34, is an overview memo. I'd refer you to that if you have the packets in front of you. If not, I think there are some in the back. Are there some in the back, Kathleen? Yes. In the back room, on the table back there. And again, the draft work plan is on page 36 of your packet. As a way of an overview, we are annually required by our Roundtable bylaws to develop a work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. This is done in correlation with our strategic plan, which is a plan done every 3 years and lays out the broad strategic objectives of the Roundtable. The work plan is designed to correlate with that strategic plan. And in my simple way of looking at it, the strategic plan is the overall plan for this organization. The annual work plan is like the tactical plan, the actual implementation steps. Your committee appointed by the Roundtable at one of our prior meetings met on May 21st. There were 5 members, myself as chair, Terry as vice chair, Sam Hindi is the immediate past chair, Angelina was a member, and Kaya Econ from Redwood City was the 5th member. Also participating was Kathleen Wentworth. Linda, I believe you were there. You were not, I'm sorry. And Bert was there as well. We met from 3:30 to 5 o'clock and had a fairly detailed discussion of the work plan. The work plan is laid out on page 34. Starts with the same plan that we had a year ago, because that plan is meant to be the tactics for the year, but it carries over from year to year until we revise the strategic plan. And we took that original, used last year's work plan as our base, and then went through that and added or deleted or corrected based on the discussion that we had. If you look at your work plan, you'll notice there were 7 strategic goals. And under each of the strategic goals, we then laid out what we thought the objectives and the tactics would be to implement those for the upcoming year. If I can find it myself, I will look. I will try to speak from it. Hang on 1 minute. Yeah, so if you look at your strategic plan, the strategic plan on goals 1 was, again, familiarize our Congress people with the objectives of the Roundtable. And our work plan item is to brief the 3 members of the factors affecting aircraft noise, health impacts, et cetera, as well as the actions of the Roundtable. That carries over from last year. Strategic plan number 2 was to review and comment on aircraft procedures. And by the way, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, then we can come back if you have any questions or if members of the committee wish to add any comments. Please feel free to do so at that time. Strategic plan number 2 was review and comment on aircraft procedures, particularly arrival, departure, and ground-based procedures. We again effectively carried over basically the same work tactics that we had a year ago for work goal number 2. There were, by the way, 8 subcomponents, so there was a fairly exhaustive list of items under that, because you might imagine aircraft departures, arrivals, and ground-based operations does involve a lot of our work. Work goal number 3 was aircraft operation noise. There were 3 action items under that strategic objective that we were going to work on this year. 2 of them were carried over from last year. The only one we added was to increase some technical studies for this year with respect to the evolution of ground-based noise at the ground level as it moves up the hillside. So we're adding some studies. Other than that, the 2 work items we had last year will carry over. And that, again, is included in the packet. Aircraft number 4 was effectively our legislative goals, lobby for aircraft noise reduction, and there were 4 work items under that, again involving collaboration, working with the Quiet Skies Caucus, and lobbying and reviewing the pieces of legislation that are being proposed or that we're advocating for. So that would be the work plan under item number 4. Item number 5 is the Airline Award Program. This was a program that we've had for a number of years to work with the airlines and effectively recognize those airlines which have done an outstanding job on reducing noise, particularly during night, to address the issue that was raised earlier. That was suspended during the pandemic, and our discussion was to reinvigorate it for the year coming up. So that was the action item there. Item number 6 was addressing community concerns. This was a fairly expansive one. There were 4 items under that. Probably the most significant one there that we're adding is expanding the Roundtable learning projects and trying to build greater awareness and provide learning forums for members of this committee as well as the public through a more vigorous approach on the use of the website as well as learning modules. So that was the tactic or the work object under that. Number 7 is a broad category, improve Roundtable effectiveness. We added quite a few there. I think almost all of them are added. There are 6 items there, but that includes new member packets. That includes the glossary of aviation terms, which we did last year. We're expanding. It includes learning project materials. It includes a satellite map to give us a visual understanding of what flights are flying over our communities, so you can actually see which ones are flying and when they should be flying graphically. It includes tutoring sessions, one-on-one for those who request them. And it does include an increased focus on our website, making it more user-friendly and more accessible not only to the public but to members as well. So those, in a 5-minute, 20,000-foot capsule summary, were the work plan for this upcoming year. So before I open it to member discussion, let me see if Kathleen would like to add anything.
Just one thing. One thing that I think the committee members were noting was a little bit of frustration because they were charged with changing or improving or deleting or adding on to the work plan. They were not charged with changing any of the strategic plan. And since the work plan is sort of part of the existing, still existing today, strategic plan, they were a little hamstrung on what they could do. We will, however, be working with a strategic committee later in the fall to come up with a new strategic plan effective for the January 1st year. So these goals will be all looked at quite a bit more comprehensively once they're allowed to kind of look at the strategic plan and change those goals.
Thank you, Kathleen. Are there members of the subcommittee that would like to make any comments before we open up to the public? Terry? Vice Chairman O'Connell?
Sure. I think it was a really good discussion that we had, and we went over some of the language and how we could incorporate other things. And one of the things I'm really happy that we were able to incorporate was to bring in the health aspects, not just noise, but to mention health, because I think that that is something that is more and more being included in some of these studies, and certainly airplane noise can affect health. And so I was glad that we could find a slot under our very precise guidelines, the strategic plan, that we could be able to put in health in part of this so that we'd be able to address that later on.
Thank you. Other members of the committee that wish to comment on the work plan and the meeting? If not, I would just add my congratulations to all of them. It was a fairly intensive meeting for the hour and a half. A lot of great discussion, a lot of ideas. And I think we came up with a good work plan. The one item I did not mention, I apologize, we did talk about the scope of the work that we're trying to do and the resources we've had, and the effort to try to extend our resources to enable us to do more of this. And our discussions with the county and with the airport with respect to providing financial support for us to do that. So that was part of this discussion, and it is listed as a objective in item number 7. Okay. If there are no other comments, let me open it up for public comment. I'm going to take public comment on this at this time. I'm sorry, before I do that, any members on Zoom? I'm sorry, guys, I forgot to look up there. Any members on Zoom that wish to comment?
There's none at this time.
Okay, great. With that, let's close member comment, take public comment, then bring it back to the members for motion and final comments. Are there any public comments? We have one right here. Okay.
Give me 1 second to start your timer. Thank you. You may begin.
Hello, again, Ramy Tan, Pacifica resident and architect. Just want to comment on strategic plan 1. We do have a new senator coming up will be elected this fall, so they will probably need to be briefed on this. And looking through strategic plan 2, again, I haven't seen anything here about discussions about a possible curfew for the airport, for the flyovers over the communities between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Other than that, it's a great-looking work plan. I like the idea of the airline award program, and if for the public education, if they can do some local forums with the city council members and board of supervisors, that would be great. Because kind of feel pretty lonely as like one of the few public members here at the meeting. Thank you.
I might add a couple of things, and thank you for those comments, sir. Before I come back to other comments, see if there's any other public comments. Are there any other public comments?
There is none at this time.
Any on Zoom?
No on Zoom as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Are there any questions or comments of our public speaker? If not, I might add, if you look at strategic goal number 2, which does talk about aircraft procedures, arrival, departures, and ground base, there are a couple of those objectives that do deal with nighttime noise. And again, we have to do this in the context of our strategic plan. So on a strategic plan, that had been a strategic goal of trying to reduce the nighttime operations a few years ago. We were successful through a lot of efforts through our former chairman, Sam Hindy, and former chairman before that, Ricardo Ortiz, to get a nighttime curfew in effect, and I use that word sort of loosely, from, I think it was 1 to 5, that correct hours. We had originally proposed it from being from 10 to 7. Unfortunately, the FAA was not prepared to go that route yet, but through the efforts of Congresswoman Spear, Ricardo and Sam and other members of this committee, we did at least get a start. We are continuing to push for extending that nighttime curfew. So that is part of one of the strategic goals, and it is an operational aspect here under subcategory 2. In addition, we are evaluating the nighttime departures, and we are evaluating the nighttime runways, and we're evaluating nighttime operations overall to see if we can continue to mitigate that noise. The biggest complaint we probably get is the disruption caused to communities at night. And we are trying to address that, but it's not something we can do under our sole authority. It does take a collaborative effort, but we are moving forward on that. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to share that with you, but your comments are well taken. Second comment, if any community does want some presentation on the roundtable, or please let us know. We're happy to see if we can accommodate you at a city council meeting or some town hall if necessary. I got to be careful because we are limited in what we can do, and I don't want to overcommit, but we are trying to be receptive to member concerns and community concerns, so we'll try to address that. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. Just if you don't mind,
Please.
if we could ask Jean to kind of tell us a little bit about the legality of general curfew in the airport, because this is not allowed currently. If you could elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Hindy. And I was also going to state that what we looked at was really not a curfew. It was the choice of noise abatement procedures to fly different procedures at night because, as Mr. Hindy pointed out, we are not able to, the airport is unable to implement curfews at this time based on current legislation. So you just, it's not possible to do a curfew at this time without doing a Part 161. And I don't want to get into all the details of a Part 161. It's very expensive, and it was intended to deal with the problem of the older Stage 2 aircraft, which we have none of those flying essentially anymore. So it's kind of moot and inexpensive, and there's been no successful restriction in place for Stage 3 and beyond aircraft, including any curfews. Any of the curfews that are at airports predated the Airport Noise and Capacity Act, in which did bring about the Part 161, and essentially no more curfews would be allowed. But those that were before then are grandfathered in.
Gene, the processes that were able to enact with the collaboration of the FAA has reduced nighttime noise.
Correct. Through using different procedures and flying over the water rather than over land, that sort of thing.
So not a curfew per se, but we've had a similar impact.
Correct.
But not totally, and only from 1 to 5. Yeah. Thank you, Gene. Appreciate that. Thank you, Sam. Are there other comments or questions? Okay. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the FY 24-25 work plan for the SFO roundtable.
Nogales moves.
Moved by
Second.
member and seconded by moved by member Nogales and seconded by member Hindy. Okay. Any further discussion before? Have we had public comment on this? We took public comment. We did. Okay. Any further discussion from the members? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please? Yeah.
Okay. City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors, no response. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office, no response. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Yes.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, no response. CCAG, Airport Land Use. Yes. Town of Atherton, no response. City of Belmont.
Aye.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma, no response. City of Daly City, No response. City of East Palo Alto, Ms. Berrigan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay, no response. Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park, no response. City of Millbrae.
Aye.
City of Pacifica, Ms. Bowles. Thank you. Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Redwood City, no response. City of San Bruno, no response. City of San Carlos, no response. City of San Mateo, oh, excuse me, I'll skip that over. City of South San Francisco.
Aye.
Town of Woodside, Mr. Gold. Thank you, sir. And it's unanimous.
Great, well, thank you. We have a work plan. Now we just have to get to it. Okay. I might add that we will be having our meeting this fall on the review of our 3-year strategic plan. And I forget who is members of that, but regardless whether or not you're a member, you are invited to attend and participate. So we'll let you know when that is and welcome your attendance and your comments at that time. With that, let's move to the next item on the agenda, which is presentations. The first presentation is the chairman's report. I'll keep it fairly brief, but let me start off by welcoming a new member of our roundtable. That's Andrea Papajohn from the city of Burlingame. Andrea is replacing former chairman and no longer a committee member in Burlingame. He had to retire due to work issues, and that's Ricardo Ortez. Andrea, I believe you work for the city of Millbrae, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
So you're experienced, so welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. Very honored. Thank you.
Right, thank you for being. I also want to note we have upcoming subcommittee meetings. We'll have a TWG meeting will be held in late July at the Foster City Hall chambers. This is a meeting that's designed to follow up on the discussions we had at our April meeting around the noise metrics and questions that were raised concerning the accuracy of them. We had a speaker from Stanford that actually presented at that council meeting, and this roundtable asked that we take it to subcommittee and spend more time understanding their concerns and the research that was done with respect to the validity of the noise metrics being used. He unfortunately had some family issues and could not participate in a TWG meeting earlier, so it's been rescheduled for late July. And that date will be given to you once we finalize it with him. We will also be holding a legislative meeting in late July at the Hillsborough City Hall. The purpose of that will be to go in some detail on the new FAA reauthorization. We'll be discussing that a little bit later at this meeting at a 20,000 foot level, but we'll take time at the legislative committee to sort of understand it in more depth. And so I'll defer any further discussions on that. We do not have any ground-based subcommittees scheduled between now and our next roundtable. So I think our next ground-based committee will probably be later this fall, pending a special need for one. Terry, am I correct on that? Okay. Okay. And those are the standing committees that we have. The next item I do want to note is topics for upcoming meetings. As we've talked about in the past, we're trying to take the opportunity each of these roundtables to sort of bring us up to speed and build awareness over some of the changes going on in the airfield, particularly around unmanned aircraft and supersonics and other areas that will be affecting our communities. And while there's uncertain as exactly what roles the roundtable will play in that, or what roles the airport or the FAA or anybody else will play, we want to at least make all of us aware so when those roles are determined, we're in a better position to respond to them and also understand the impacts that they might have and opportunities we might have to manage that in our communities. We do have, in the future meetings, we do have we're planning on having a presentation by NASA on advanced air mobility. We are going to have industry representatives come in at another meeting and talk about unmanned aircraft, what's going on in the industry. It's moving pretty rapidly. We do have a production facility in one of our local communities already that are building these unmanned aircraft. LA has already put together an unmanned aircraft flight plan, strategic plan, which, so we're trying to get up to speed on that. And we just received word yesterday that Peter Kirsch, who's probably one of the most renowned aviation experts, he's an attorney with the law firm of Kaplan and Kirsch, and I believe is one of the editors on our publication Airport A&R, A-N-R, that we get every month, or every week, I think, has consented to join us at a future meeting and talk about noise metrics or whatever we want him to talk about. He gave a presentation at the UC Davis Symposium on the history of noise metrics, where we started from, where we are, and how we got there, and what they all mean, and which ones are good and which ones might be changed. And I think you'll find that incredibly informative. I thought at the UC Davis, he was probably one of the most renowned speakers, one of the best speakers, and I think he'll be very informative. So he'll be joining us probably this fall. Hate to do it during the summer because it's hard to make sure everybody's available during the summer. So those are upcoming topics. If you have any topics you'd like us to consider, please let Kathleen know, or let me know, or Terry know, and we'll see if we can move forward with that. We want to bring to your attention areas of change that might be affecting our communities, and so please let us know that. I don't have any other comments from the roundtable, from the chairman's update. Any questions about that? Okay, anything on Zoom? I see no hands raised.
No one on Zoom.
Okay, with that, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 6, the airport director update. And we're pleased to have with us Doug Yakel, who is going to stand in for Ivar Satero. So Doug, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Royce. Just a few updates for the airport, then I'll turn it over to Bert for some further updates. We're in the midst of the summer travel season. We're expecting about 15.5 million travelers at SFO between Memorial and Labor Day. Over Memorial Day weekend, we saw about 575,000 passengers go through our airport. That's about 94% of what we saw Memorial Day 2019. So we're almost back at those pre-pandemic levels. So 94% on passengers, but flight operations continues to lag. We're at about 82% of pre-pandemic flight activity levels. So we continue to see airlines using larger aircraft to grow their capacity rather than adding flights. An update on the runway closure. As you know, we've had runway 28 left closed since January 16th to make improvements to 2 taxiways. We just announced yesterday that this project is ahead of schedule, and we expect to open that runway early. Originally, we were planning to have it opened by July 1st. We now expect to have it reopened by June 21st. So this is good from a delay impact perspective. We had forecasted that about a third of our flights would experience a delay, and that's held fairly true throughout this runway closure. We also look at the rate of cancellations, and that's always remained below 1% throughout the closure, which means that airlines did reduce the right amount of flights to kind of right size based on the reduced runway capacity. One item of note, though, because of these airline reductions, what this does mean is that we'll see about a 9% increase in flight operations at the conclusion of this project, and that's basically airlines returning their flight operations to the level they had originally planned for this summer. A couple other capital projects going on. We're going to be opening the final section of Harvey Milk Terminal 1 on June 17th. We'll be doing a ribbon cutting for that. And then in the first or second week of July, we're going to do the groundbreaking for what we call the Terminal 3 West renovation. This is kind of the half of United's Terminal 3 that has yet to be renovated. This was a project that we postponed during the pandemic. We're going to be getting back to that, be kicking that off this summer. A couple of notes about new airline service. Some of these I might have mentioned, but just for review, May 17th, we had a new airline, Air Premia. It's a Korean carrier. Launch 4 flights weekly to Seoul. The arrival comes in at 12:30 p.m. and departs at 3 p.m. It's a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Last week, we had Breeze Airways launch twice weekly seasonal service to Grand Junction, Colorado. This flight arrives at 6:25 p.m., departs at 1:20 p.m. the next day. It's an Airbus A220 aircraft. United also launched seasonal service, summer service to Barcelona on May 23rd. Flight arrives at 7:05 p.m., departs using a different aircraft at 5:30 p.m. That's a Boeing 777 aircraft. And a Canadian airline, Porter Airlines, will launch 3 times weekly summer service to Montreal. That's on June 28th. Flight arrives at 11:12 p.m., departs 7:40 a.m. the next morning. That's an Embraer E195 aircraft. Lastly, in May, our airport director, Ivar Satero, announced his plans to retire later this year. So the airport's begun the process to search for a replacement for his position. The goal is to have that position identified and filled by about the holiday season, such that the incoming airport director can have some overlap time with Director Satero to ensure kind of a smooth transition at SFO. So we expect that Ivar will kind of wind down his career at SFO by the end of this year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bert for his items.
Thank you for that. So wanted to go ahead and let everybody know that our GBAS, we did the annual flight check on that, passed, and we're good to go for another year. That was a mad scramble for that. The FAA is actually asking for the airport to pay for our flight testing of our airport-owned equipment, so we scrambled for that and made it work. The Repair and Replacement Initiative under the Noise Insulation Program, we did have a bit of a drop in the homeowner satisfaction rate. We believe we'll see a little bit more of that, and that's due to the long wait list. There were some folks on there since 2018. So the interviews are done for the survey at the end of the program once the home is completed, and so the numbers may suffer some more. The Second Chance Initiative, under the units in design phase, we currently have no homes in the design phase right now. We're wrapping up the units in construction right now and trying to schedule up an apartment complex for the next year. We're looking for the grant money for next year on that one. Expanded eligibility, you can see that the numbers were holding since last month, although we did have 3 declined participation in the 2022 phase. The other numbers are holding true, and we had the number from 55 to 45 drop in the Group 2 EEI phase, the expanded eligibility. This one, many of you local will recall that on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of May, we had both runways 28 left and 28 right closed. Obviously 28 left for the construction, but with the additional use that 28 right has been getting, they had to do more rubber removal, and they also at the time scheduled the approach light work for that runway. And when they did that, the FAA was using runway 19 facing south for arrivals and departures. And you can see the nighttime departures we have here on the screen. We did have one really good one, which is this one here. Oop, let's go back. This one here. And so I asked the FAA, if we have to do these, can we do more like that so we don't wake up half the peninsula at night? Preferred would be to do opposite direction, which is a runway 1 departure with the 19 arrivals. Now, I'm not asking that we do it immediately in conjunction with each other. I'm asking when there are lulls in the arrivals that we do the runway 1 departures. And so the FAA did say they would consider that. When I checked the flights on the 4th and 5th, where we also had the closures, there were no runway 19 departures. So with a little luck, they did hear what we were asking and heeded that for us. So we did jump on it immediately with the FAA, and I believe they were working with us on this one. Through the chair, any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Bert, and thank you, Doug. Are there any questions? Member Ford?
I have two. First, are we invited to the Harvey Milk thing on June 17th?
Absolutely. Once we have that time confirmed, we'll pass it through Kathleen. Yeah, it'd be great to have you there.
We didn't hear the question online.
I'm sorry. You want to repeat the question?
The question was, are we invited to the celebration at the Harvey Milk Terminal on June 17th? And Mr. Yekel said yes.
Is your mic on? Your mic is on, right, I think?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
The other question was that the plane from Barcelona came in but left in another plane. How did they do that?
So they're basically using a different aircraft. So it may be an aircraft that was operating domestically and then turns around and represents the departure to Barcelona that night. So rather than having a lot of international carriers, it's one in, one out. United's large operations at SFO, they can mix and match how they're using these aircraft.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Hindi.
Thank you, Chair. Bert, on the last item that you talked about, connecting with the FAA regarding the reverse operation, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Can you go with your cursor? Where is that? Is that going over the 92?
So you can see the aircraft went out this way before coming back across. I believe it did continue east, but you can see it took a very tight, nice left turn there rather than a slow left turn. And
It is not the same as when we have reverse operation, is it?
it is, very much so.
So during reverse operation, when we have the takeoff, Foster City get impacted quite a bit.
That's visible right here. Yes.
Yeah, so we don't want to shift noise from wherever it is today to come to Foster City.
Agreed, and that's why I jumped in on this one right away when we noticed it. But my comment on this one particular flight here is, shoot, if we have to do reverse operations, that's the way to do it.
Got it, understood.
Keep it away from Foster City,
advocating
put it
for
over
it.
the water.
Got you, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Bert. Other comments or questions from the members? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank Doug and Bert for their presentation. We'll take public comment on all the presentations at the end on all of them, with the exception of item number 8, and we'll take that right after item number 8, just because the speaker needs to leave after his presentation and Q&A. But for the public, if you could hold your questions on the presentations till the end, we'll take them then. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 7, which is the FAA announcements and the update. I believe, Ms. Chen, you'll be speaking on behalf of the FAA. And by the way, thank you for attending. We appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Just a couple of announcements. I'm sure many of you have already heard. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Many of you have heard that the FAA reauthorization was signed and passed in the White House. That happened on May 16th. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 reauthorizes the FAA and related revenue authorities through September 30th, 2028, and reauthorizes the National Transportation Safety Board through September 30th, 2028. I think I said, so they're both reauthorized through September 30th, 2028. So that passed, so we're happy about that. The other really good news that we have to share is the community education video series is posted on our website. We sent the link to Kathleen, and she, I think she's in the process, or she has shared it with others.
So we really appreciate that. That project started in November 2019. And, you know, the series, I think, will help educate the public on the complexities of the national air systems, you know. So the airspace, the procedures, the noise, how things are created. So we appreciate that. Those are the only two things I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. I might just note on your agenda, item number 7, the link that Ms. Chen referred to is attached there. So you can just follow up on that if you have on the community education series and the community engagement air mobility areas. Are there any questions of the members with respect to Ms. Chen or the FAA on any of the comments raised? We are going to have a discussion, item number 9, I believe, from our consultants with respect to FAA reauthorization. So we'll be getting into that in just a minute. So, Ms. Chen, I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move to item number 8, which is our presentation of outside speaker tonight, and this is on supersonic aircraft. We have a speaker from NASA who is with us online, I believe. Is that correct, Kathleen? Okay, and I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw, I'm going to mispronounce your first name. Is it Nauyum? Not Ganoung, okay. Mr. Shaw is the manager of the Supersonic Overflight and Community Response for the Commercial Supersonic Technology Project, which is part of the NASA Advanced Air Vehicles Program. He will explain the NASA Quesst program, which will be obtaining feedback from residents to noise exposure from tests of the updated supersonic thump. What we're trying to bring to your attention and awareness of fact is that there is a reinvigoration of the supersonic program, and it's being retested with new technology and hopefully much quieter technology than previously. And we thought it'd be appropriate to bring to the attention of this roundtable exactly what's going on and where we might stand with that. And Mr. Shaw was kind enough to join us. We will be taking public questions on this following Mr. Shaw's presentation, since he's from another part of the country and can leave us after this presentation. We don't need to hold you up till late at night, so appreciate you being here. With that, Mr. Shaw, we'll turn the table over to you. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share some information regarding the NASA Quesst mission. I want to point out that also attending this meeting is Kristen Hatfield. She's in the Public Affairs Office, also here at NASA Langley in Hampton, Virginia. And so at the end, I've got some emails listed there. So for further questions or information, please feel free to reach out to our Public Affairs contacts for further details or other inquiries. As I said, I'm here on the East Coast at NASA Langley Research Center, but I'm certainly quite familiar with SFO, having come out to NASA Ames in Mountain View for work countless times over the last almost 40 years. And more personally, my daughter is about to finish her undergraduate degree at UC Berkeley, so the Bay Area has factored pretty large in our lives in recent years. So with that, I'll begin the presentation. This is an overview of of NASA's Quesst mission involving quiet supersonic flight. So we can go to the next slide, please. So, we've had supersonic flight since for almost nearly 75 years, since the Bell X-1 and Chuck Yeager back in 1947. But there are certainly some barriers to overland commercial supersonic flight. We did have that for quite some time, starting in the 70s with the Concorde, flying from New York and Washington to London and Paris. But the introduction of the SST there brought about that the problem of sonic boom noise took much greater public attention and exposure, and demonstrated that the level of sonic boom noise and its annoyance is unacceptable to the general public. And as a result, a lot of restrictions followed, both from the U.S. and other nations, that essentially prohibited commercial supersonic flight operations over the U.S., and many other countries followed suit with similar regulations. And that limited the Concorde to only over water flights. So supersonic commercial operations were limited to over water. And as a result, that tremendously limited the market potential for that type of operation. More recently, there's been a resurgence in interest in commercial supersonic flight. Brought about a lot of changes in technology and advances in efficiencies and other aspects. But again, the creation of a market for supersonic commercial aircraft, there are several barriers to that. There's certainly economic ones. Companies have to make money on them. There are environmental issues regarding emissions or sustainability. But one of the major ones, again, is the sonic boom in terms of noise. That there has to be a way to eliminate or substantially reduce the sonic boom that's generated by aircraft in order to potentially allow for overland supersonic flight. And so NASA's Quests mission, it aims to provide information to U.S. and international regulators, to provide them data, statistically valid data from studies that we're going to conduct that will inform the potential addressing of the rules regarding overland supersonic flight. Essentially, right now we have a speed limit. You simply can't go supersonic overland. Potentially that could be morphed into more of a sound limit. If you're below some level of quietness, it may be permissible. So the Quest mission is intended to generate data that can be used to inform that type of discussion, debate, and ultimately decisions. Okay, next slide, please. So just a quick explanation of a sonic boom. I think most people are aware to some extent of how a sonic boom is generated and why, but there's also some potential myths out there. So this chart just kind of explains it quickly, that on the left, you see when you're flying at subsonic speeds, below the speed of sound, the airplane's moving forward, the air in front of the airplane is disturbed and lets the air in front of the airplane know that something's coming, can move out of the way. But as you go faster and faster, once you get to Mach 1, that the airplane is moving at the same speed as the disturbance in front of it, so those wave fronts, those disturbances can't move ahead of the aircraft, and they tend to build up, and they create what you see there is a shock wave or a shock front, which then gets to ground, and that shock wave is essentially a big pressure jump that when your ears hear that jump as it goes by you, it interprets that as a boom sound. And so that's what happens at Mach 1, and when you go faster than Mach 1, that shock wave ends up being a cone that moves along with the aircraft as the aircraft moves over, through the air, and where that shock wave intersects the ground, and as it keeps moving, it generates the sonic boom. So it's important to note that the boom is created over the entire length of the supersonic flight path. It's being generated whenever the aircraft is flying supersonically, just like the wake of a boat is always continuous following behind the boat. But you would only see the wake when it passes you if you're standing on a riverbank, for example. So while that shock wave is always generated, you as a person will only hear a single event of that sonic boom when that shock wave passes you. And so if you go to the next slide, we have just a quick little animation that just kind of puts that in a visual perspective. You see if the airplane's flying, you've got that cone that forms behind it, and where that cone would hit the ground, where you see that big white arc, that will be where the shock wave intersects the ground, and when that passes a given person, you can just play that again a couple of times, that's when that pressure wave passes your ears, and your ears interpret that through your brain as a sonic boom. So it's a little different what you see in movies. It's not just a one-time occurrence. It happens during the entire supersonic flight path. Okay, next slide. So just to make clear, we talk a lot about issues with community noise and aircraft noise. And so I want to draw the distinction between that and what we're talking about here as a sonic boom. When you talk about typical airplane noise, it's generated from the
engine of the aircraft and the aerodynamics of the air moving over it. It's primarily, something at low altitude that's heard on the ground, and obviously as the airplane climbs in altitude, that sound on the ground diminishes. It's fairly localized, under the flight path of the aircraft when it's at low altitude. And it's a long duration sound. It's not just a one-time thing. Airplane's flying overhead and you're hearing that sound during that entire time. And so this is an issue more, in the proximity to an airport when the aircraft are at low altitude. And there can be large variations in the sound levels that you hear, depending on the community you're in, your specific location. You can be in one location and you have a certain level of noise that you hear from an overflying aircraft. You move a couple miles away and the noise level may be substantially different depending where you are relative to that flight path. And so that's in contradiction, or not contradiction, but it's separate from what we're talking about for supersonic flight. The sound that we're talking about here, the sonic boom, is more of the sound is due to the shock wave emanating through the air. It's not from the sound of the engine. So normally you're going to get it from what's being generated when the airplane's at high altitude under cruise conditions flying supersonically. And as I said, it's something that happens along the entire supersonic flight path. Big difference is that it's only a short duration impulse of sound that an individual hears, just when that shock wave passes you, as opposed to a long-term sound from low altitude aircraft. And unlike the large variations that you see in sound near an airport, depending on where you go, in this case, that carpet you saw was a pretty wide, could be 20 miles or more depending on the altitude of the aircraft. So you can get a similar sound level over a potentially very large area. And again, it's not necessarily, it's not going to be just located near an airport. It's going to be during the entire supersonic cruise time. Okay, next slide. Oh, before we go to the next slide, I just want to point out this is, there were some questions that you've had that have been posed earlier regarding takeoff and landing noise certification standards for supersonic aircraft. And I just want to make sure it's clear that the Quesst mission, we're focused on the sonic boom type issue. So it's not addressing the takeoff and landing noise certification standards. It's only talking about the en route aspects, and I'll explain why in an upcoming slide. But with that said, NASA is conducting research related to landing and takeoff noise for SSTs, and that research will inform regulators on how they should develop the appropriate standards for those type of aircraft. I mean, some of the challenges that entails is that SSTs, they operate somewhat differently than subsonic aircraft. For example, they use different levels of power settings for takeoff. Subsonic aircraft, typically you're at a very high power setting at takeoff. SSTs use high power settings for cruise and much lower ones for departure. And so, the processes and certification conditions may have to be looked at in a different way. Plus, a lot of the certification work involves analysis and predictions in addition to sound measurements. And subsonic engines, with the years of history behind of data, there's good confidence in those predictions. But SST engines are going to be somewhat different than subsonic engines, and so the understanding and confidence in the predictions for sound levels from those aircraft, that's something that continues to evolve. And so that work is going on outside of the Quesst mission. And again, if there's more specific questions or further interest in learning more about that aspect, I encourage you to reach out to Kristen or Matt Camlett or other point of contact from NASA Public Affairs, and their emails are given at the end of this briefing. So now specifically, what is the Quesst mission? So we look at the mission really in three phases. Again, it's to develop information on providing information to regulators. And so phase one of this mission is the development of an aircraft that can generate a quiet sonic thump, much quieter than the conventional sonic boom. And so that work is progressing now with the X-59. Recently completed it. We had the rollout ceremony at the beginning of this year, and now a lot of the ground test is underway in preparation for its first flight later this year, and that'll be followed by months of envelope expansion and flight tests to ensure safety of flight, that the airplane will fly as designed. Then we'll move into what's called the second phase of the acoustic validation phase. So while phase 1 is to make sure that the airplane is safe to fly, phase 2 is to see, does the airplane generate the supersonic acoustic characteristics that it was designed to do. So we'll be doing a series of detailed in-flight and ground measurements at NASA Armstrong in Southern California to validate that acoustic signature and also validate a lot of the design tools and prediction tools that were used in its development. And then we proceed on to phase 3, which is the community response testing. This is where we'll be flying this aircraft over different parts of the U.S., over different communities. We'll be measuring sound levels on the ground, as well as gathering response from the public through conducting public surveys on their reaction to that noise. Was it noticeable? Was it or was it not? If it was, was it annoying to you, or was it was it not annoying? Things of that nature, in order to gauge the level of noticeability and annoyance relative to the level of sound generated from quiet supersonic flight. Go to the next slide, please. A little more detail on the aircraft. As I said, the X-59 is a unique, one-of-a-kind aircraft designed to demonstrate, the quiet supersonic technology. Just to allay some myths, this is not a prototype for a commercial supersonic transport. It's not, Son of Concorde or another smaller version of what will ultimately be designed to carry passengers. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind single-seat aircraft designed to demonstrate the technologies that can be used to generate quiet supersonic flight, to do the proper aircraft shaping in order for the shock waves coming off the aircraft to reach the ground in a way that they don't cause substantial disturbance and therefore generate a very quiet sonic thump instead of a loud boom. But the intent is that this aircraft will generate a supersonic signature that will be similar to what a large commercial transport might generate. And it has to do so, doing regular conventional flight maneuvers that a transport would do, so that we can fly it into national airspace and gather this data. It's a long airplane, so 100 feet long, has a single seat for the test pilot. It's intended to fly at roughly Mach 1.4, a little over 900 miles per hour, up at an altitude of 55,000 feet. And so that work is underway. Looking forward to its first flight, and a lot of flight test data coming up in the coming months. So if you go to, and so now how will we use this information? If you go to the next slide, as I said, we'll be gathering community response as well as measuring sound levels, and that's to help us generate this notional kind of plot on the bottom left, which is called a dose-response relationship, where the x-axis is the dose metric, or the noise level that the aircraft generates, and the y-axis is the response from the community, from the survey participants, as to their annoyance to that level of sound. And so we'll kind of try to gather data in kind of the yellow cloud type area, and in simple terms, kind of try to boil that down into a single type of a curve that shows that relationship. And that's the type of information that we'll be providing to regulators as part of what we're calling our critical commitment for commercial supersonic technology from NASA Aeronautics. And so we'll be generating that data over these community tests in the coming years. So, but how loud is this aircraft going to be in terms of its sound levels? And that the little graphic above there kind of demonstrates that. I should point out, you see the scale on here. It's called the perceived level scale, and it uses units of decibels. But I caution you, this is not the same scale that you typically see in terms of sound exposure levels, for aircraft monitoring, or what you see, in terms of like leaf blowers and other things in terms of a dBA level that you see there. This is a unique scale specific to short impulsive sounds, but it uses the same units of dB. So it's like, Fahrenheit versus a Celsius scale. If it's 40 degrees, it makes a big difference whether you're talking, which scale are you on? And so, caution you that it's not directly comparable to those other scales. But on this specific scale, you can see the X59 falls around almost around the 75 mark, which is equivalent to about somebody closing a car door across the street from you, or similar to distant thunder. And you can contrast that with, what's that circled in red there, the Concorde, the sonic boom from the Concorde or other commercial transports is much louder. You can see it's around that 105 type mark, which is similar to nearby thunder, or how a car door a slam would sound like if you're inside the car, or a balloon pop. And so it demonstrates, that we're on a much, much quieter part of the scale. And because the decibel scale is logarithmic, what you see there is not like a 25% reduction. It's many times lower than the like a Concorde sonic boom. So that gives you kind of a relative understanding of the type of sound that we're expected to generate with the X59. Some of the aspects of the community test, we're planning on doing roughly between 4 and 6 tests in different communities across the U.S. I'll talk a little more on an upcoming slide about the regions and the type of variations we're looking at in those locations. Each test is going to be about roughly a month long, with multiple flights happening over the course of every day over that time frame at different times of day, different random times, in order to see what the reaction is, the response is in those cases. But it's going to be during daytime and waking hours. It's not going to be during overnight or nighttime flights. And we're going to generate a range of sound levels, because the X59 is designed to be able to vary that level. And the purpose is to acquire this community response that's representative of the general population. Next slide. And so typically, what's our flight going to look like when we actually start our phase 3 community tests? So, this graph you can see on the bottom right, the airplane's going to take off from a given airfield. It's going to fly as any other subsonic aircraft until it gets to our community study area, which could be as much as 100 miles away from the airfield. It will accelerate to its supersonic flight condition, make a pass over the survey community. We'll measure sound levels on the ground, gather the public response. Aircraft will circle back for potentially a second pass, and then after a couple of passes, it'll get decelerated back to subsonic flight conditions, and then come on back home. And we rinse and repeat several times. Could be up to 3 times, 3 flights a day, or it could be no flights a day. But we're going to vary all of those parameters over the course of roughly 1 month study. Okay, next slide. And so where we're going to be doing these community tests, that is still being determined. At this point, our first study the airplane will fly out of NASA Armstrong, which is Edwards Air Force Base, which is our flight test center, primarily for risk reduction. So we fly from the home base and for safety purposes and to gain some confidence, to a location that's not familiar or accustomed to hearing sonic booms, and conduct our study over that community. And then the subsequent locations are still being determined. You see on this map, you see all these purple dots. These are just the airfields themselves that meet all the technical and safety-related constraints just for the X59 aircraft. And we started with roughly 4,000 airfields around the whole country, and we look at all those constraints of like runway length and width, field elevation, hangar availability, security, a lot of those aspects, number of overall field operations that happen at a given location. It comes down to roughly 50-ish airfields that we think can accommodate the aircraft. And then also, from these 50 airfields, there has to be some population center within the range of the aircraft that we can conduct our study over. So that's also a factor into that. So what we're doing now is looking at these different airfields and trying to ensure that we have a location that we test in each one of these different colored climate zones. These are Department of Energy climate zone definitions of a cold climate, a hot, humid climate, the tan area in the lower right is that's the hot humid climate. The red is the hot dry climate, and the green is a kind of a mixed humid climate. So we want to try to ensure geographic diversity as well as the climate diversity, because that does affect how the sonic foam propagates to the ground. And there's also different housing construction in these different regions during different times of year. So are people at home? Are they outside? Do they have the windows open, windows closed? All these things may factor in. So we want to get some overall diversity in that environment as well as the population demographics. And also ensure that each study will happen over different urbanization levels. For background noise, rural environments are going to be much quieter than suburban ones, which are quieter than urban ones. So that background level of noise can also impact people's perception of noticeability or noise level from a different sound source. So that's kind of where we are today. If you go to my last slide, it shows you our current timeline for phase 3 for the community response test. We're currently in our planning stage, and we'll be continuing to work at developing our final plans, doing some risk reduction activities and check out of our survey systems, our acoustic measurement capabilities and data processing capabilities, as well as engaging with regulators like the International Civil Aviation Organization, the FAA, on our approaches, getting their feedback on validity of that approach for acceptability of the results. And all that will lead to our execution stage when we actually do our community test starting in roughly 2026, and trying to conduct a test roughly every 6 months in a different location, completing that in about 28. And then starting in 2027, after we've started doing our studies, is start providing some initial information to regulators as to how these tests are going, and see if that can inform some of our future activities. So there's a lot to do coming up, but we're looking forward to gathering a lot of information to look at potential supersonic flight in our future. I think that's my last slide. If you go to the next one, I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Well, thank you.
I note the 2 names for Matt Camlett and Kristen Hatfield for inquiries to our public affairs officers for further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I appreciate it. I will turn it to the members now and see if they do have any questions with respect to this particular project. Are there any comments or questions? Member O'Connell.
Fit more than one person?
Well, no, this aircraft is not like a prototype or a small version of a commercial aircraft. It is specifically designed to generate the type of sonic boom signature that will be similar to what a large transport would do. But the shapings may be similar, but the actual design of a commercial transport may be substantially different in order for it to carry passengers and cargo, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Carol. Member Ford, excuse me.
You sort of answered my question. I was going to ask about the Concorde, but one of your graphs showed that it makes a less sound than the Concorde does. But also, isn't it true that when the Concorde was operating, they weren't allowed to go supersonic while they were over the United States? They landed at Kennedy, and that was the end. I think they went to Washington, too. So this is very interesting. And then are there other, like, is the U-2 spy plane, does that make sonic booms?
Well, sorry, first question regarding the Concorde. Yeah, the sonic boom from the Concorde, they measured those, but, those without, under test conditions, but those sonic booms were limited over water in terms of their commercial operations. As far as aircraft like the U-2, my knowledge, they are not supersonic aircraft, so they would not be generating any type of a sonic boom.
And then my last comment is, you mentioned it's thunder, but that's what I was thinking. The people in the East Coast, where I grew up, have thunder all the time, so a sonic boom isn't that big a deal. You just, it sounds like thunder. But I would imagine especially this part of the country that doesn't have thunder very much, it probably creates more of a stir, yes?
Well, and that's the reason we're doing studies in different regions of the country, because again, there's different, certainly different lifestyles or different exposures or different experiences that people have in terms of their, normal type of sound exposure. And so how they react to this noise is what we want to understand, and how that does vary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Robin?
Mr. Shaw, I have a question about the ethics behind the study that you're going to be doing. So you're going to be subjecting multiple communities to this study, and in what ways, you know, when I think about human subject studies, there always needs to be informed consent. There needs to be an assurance that no undue harm will be enacted upon human subjects. I'm wondering in what ways you have given thought to the impacts these studies will have on the people who will be subjected to this, and how are you achieving informed consent?
Well, yeah, these studies that we're going to do are not going to be, you know, I don't know what the right word is, but blind or, you know, unknown studies. The communities are going to be, you know, notified ahead of time that these are going to occur.
But that's different than being notified, as opposed to you're receiving informed consent, that people are saying, yes, I agree to participate in these studies.
Part of our process is still going to involve ensuring, like, you know, we meet the NEPA review in terms of environmental protection. That involves humans, that there's no significant impact. We also go through, you know, what's normally an institutional review board to review our activities for approval, and the participants who are going to be providing surveys are going to be, you know, voluntarily recruited to this. But overall, the entire community, it's going to be, you know, done through appropriate you know, NEPA review and things of that nature before we continue forward.
Yeah, it just seems impossible to me that you would be able to achieve informed consent when you're subjecting entire communities to your study. This poses a great big ethical dilemma to me. From a research perspective, I have a doctorate, and when I went through my dissertation, informed consent in studies is critical. It's a key component before you can even begin a study. So this sounds very bizarre to me.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I can't probably talk directly to that. That's a little outside my area, but I think that does pose an interesting question, and we'll certainly try to follow up to understand how we're addressing that, you know, that type of aspect.
Thank you. Are there other comments, questions? Yes, Angelina.
Earlier in the project, were there renderings of this with the design showing space for commercial passengers? Am I remembering that wrong? No? Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't quite understand.
Oh, here we go. Sorry. I've been aware of this project for a little while, and I thought kind of a few years back there were renderings of this that showed what it would look like with some passenger seating. Am I recalling that correctly, or is my memory off?
That I don't know. The Quests mission, again, this is not supposed to replicate looking at a passenger aircraft specifically, so I'm not aware of that. That may be something related to, you know, other companies looking at potential designs for supersonic aircraft, but I really can't say. I'm not familiar with any specific renderings of passenger cabins related to this mission.
Okay, thank you.
Angelina, Doug just alluded to the fact there are some commercial companies that are producing sonic, and they may have renderings that you may have seen. So there may be out there, but outside the scope of this particular project. So.
Through the chair, am I allowed to make a comment?
Yes, you are. Yes, please.
History is a great teacher, I think. I grew up in the Midwest around a lot of Air Force jets. This was an era when supersonic flight was just happening, and we had a lot of sonic booms. I'm 82 years old. I've never had any ill effects from it. I still have all my hearing. And so it was exciting for me as a young boy and very, very much into the military, as a lot of kids my age were. So I'm not sure it's going to be harmful. It certainly wasn't harmful to me. We knew it was going to happen. The community was informed. So I don't think it's something to, I think it's something to watch, but not to be extremely concerned about.
Thank you, Mr. Edges. Member Hindi?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Shah, for your presentation. In one of your early slides, I read you said provide statistically valid data. Is it one of the goals of your mission to eliminate the sonic boom or reduce it or change its signature?
Well, the Quesst mission and the X-59 is designed to substantially soften the sound level from a sonic boom to a quiet sonic thump. There may be conditions in which it's minimized to the extent where it's not noticeable or heard. But that's the whole purpose of the aircraft, is to change that shaping of the sonic the shock waves coming off the airplane so that it is changed when it reaches the ground.
Okay, and then I got another question. So on the community input, is that information or that data collected, that's going to be submitted to the regulator? Is that my understanding? Nothing that NASA or the project team will, simply you just collect that information or that feedback or that input and pass it along?
Yeah, we'll be collecting the response from the survey participants, correlating that with the sound levels, and that's something that will be shared with regulators. Was that your question?
Yeah, and what kind of metric would you be using to measure the noise yourself?
There are several metrics in consideration that will be used. We haven't narrowed it down to any specific one, but there are certainly several sound exposure level metrics for impulsive sounds that we're considering. The one I showed on that plot, that perceived level, is just one of several of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Hindi. We have a Member Bowles on Zoom. I believe you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation, Mr. Shah. And forgive me if I may have missed something. You mentioned a particular altitude that these flights would be flying at, and I was just reading that the noise varies and decreases as the flights have higher altitude, but also that the boom spread, if you will, increases, so it affects more people the higher the altitude. So I'm just curious if you can remind us what altitude you decided on and how that was determined.
Okay. Well, when I talked about the sound diminishes at higher altitude, I was making the analogy to, if you look at a conventional airplane sound from engines and things like that, obviously as you get higher up, the sound is heard less on the ground. For the supersonic aircraft, for the sonic boom signature, as you've got that cone shape of the shock wave, so as you go higher up, it expands further when it reaches the ground. I think that, I'm not sure I can speak specifically as to how that altitude was determined, but it was designed to be at what a typical altitude for a commercial transport would be, and it's also going to be above current aircraft cruise altitudes, which makes it easier for us to fly without interfering with airspace operations of existing aircraft.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions from the members? I see no hands raised. I see none. I just have a couple, if I might. From a broader perspective, could you give me a sense of the timing of this process? Are we talking about when ultimately approvals, assuming everything went according to plan, would the federal government be prepared to authorize approvals in 2028, 2030, 2026? When would we expect to see commercial production, if it all worked?
Well, commercial production, that's going to be dependent on, if a company decides that it's going to be actually feasible for them to design and build something further down the road. Our plan is to provide our information to regulators in this roughly 2029 timeframe, at which point they will start their process of trying to determine what that standard ought to be. That timeframe is not something we have input to. That's more along, from the regulator standpoint, how they make the decision. And then once they do, now if there is a standard, now airline manufacturers can say, okay, well, if this is what we're trying to design to, is it practical for us to design and try to build and market an SST? And then you look at their time frame for that whole design process through fabrication and selling. So it's potentially it takes some time. Certainly it can't happen soon enough for me. I'd love to be able to fly faster around the world, but that's dependent on a lot of aspects that we don't have good insight or control over.
So from the government's perspective, the timetable in which production could start or be commercial use would be like 2029, 5 years from now, roughly?
Well, no, that's when we will provide our data to
Okay.
regulators for them to start their process.
Gotcha, so it could be longer than that, okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a feel for how much time we're talking about in terms of dealing with some of the issues that we're hearing and that we'd be concerned about. And then secondly, from an airport perspective, and Doug, you might have input on this, does it cause for any reconfiguration of airports? So I presume there's going to be a limited number of airports that could accommodate these supersonic airplanes. And my initial, for some reason, I was under the recollection that the San Francisco airport was not one that was targeted. That was targeted may be the bad word, but was not one that was being initially visualized as a site for supersonic aircraft. LA might be, and some of the East Coast ones, but what's the thinking around reconfiguration of airports and which airports might be visioned as being sites for supersonic production, supersonic use?
Oh, that's a good question, but fortunately I don't have insight into how that process or the thinking would occur in terms of which airports would be used. I guess a lot of that would involve what are appropriate city pairs that from a marketing standpoint for an airline they would like to fly, and that would maybe push if it's need to reconfigure a given airport, because that will be a huge market for the future use. Unfortunately, I can't speak intelligently to how that decision would get made.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand what we would be dealing with locally and what the timetable might be. And two more last questions, if I might. The agency that you're reporting to, is that the FAA or is it some other agency?
FAA will certainly, we'll be sharing all this with the FAA, and then as part of that, they're also part of the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, that will also take this information to come up with potentially standardized or harmonized standards or regulations for other countries as well. But FAA is going to be certainly the lead regulator that we will be sharing our information with.
Because I think Member Hindi raised a very appropriate question, is who's making the determination of the metrics that are acceptable or not acceptable, and what might they be? Because I think that'd be of concern to us. And then my last question would be with respect to your testing is dealing with noise. Is it going to include other potential health aspects of sonic missiles, sonic planes?
In this case, the X-59 is designed only to look at the sonic thumb characteristics.
Yeah.
It uses a conventional aircraft engine from an existing military aircraft. So it's not using technology that a supersonic transport would have outside of the shaping concepts being used. So it can't really address any other of those technologies that certainly all need to be addressed to look at for actual supersonic flight.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those are a few of the concerns I think we have as a group as we try to understand what this might entail and what impacts it might have on our communities, and particularly about the timing of it all. So I appreciate it. Any other comments before we go to public comment? Yes, Member Papajon?
Thank you, Chair. Just building off what you were saying, I was
interested to know for the community tests, and I think this has been asked, but I'm trying to ask it in a slightly different way. For the community testing period over 6 months, I'm interested to know, will NASA really be deciding where they're going to go without giving the community an opportunity to weigh in on that decision? Or will there be some opportunity for the community to decide? And I guess a community, I guess it would be probably more the airports. Will there be some opportunity for the airports to decide?
Okay, yeah, there's a few things there. First of all, the community studies are going to be roughly a month long. The 6th month was the rough time between one test to another. And, we're certainly, we'll be engaging with communities well in advance of when we would potentially, conduct our studies there, through public officials, through media and other means, and gauge how we proceed based on how that engagement goes. Your other question was about the airfields and the airports. You should note that, like I said, our community could be up to 100 miles away from where the airplane would take off from and fly. And, in terms of the airfield, that's just, again, where it takes off from under normal conventional subsonic flight, and it wouldn't involve supersonic operations close to the airfield. It would be up, at altitude as it gets close to where the community is. But our intent is that the airfields we use are most likely going to be either military or joint civil military because of the infrastructure, security, other capabilities that will be on the ground for this unique aircraft. So it wouldn't necessarily involve large commercial operations airfield.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, let's go to public comment and see if there's any questions from the public. As I said earlier, we are making exceptions to normal rules so we can accommodate the fact that Mr. Shaw's on the East Coast, and this is pretty late back there. Are there any comments from the public? We have one in chambers, so. Put the clock up, Diane. You have the clock, Diane? There we go. Okay.
Again, Ramy Tan, resident of Pacifica. Just a quick question regarding the test bed. I know that there's a number of developers of supersonic transport. I saw it's the Boom Aircraft Company, and they're actively marketing to United and American. So I'm just wondering if this project is probably 10 years too late, and what will happen, once you guys have the regulations, the data and the regulations happen in 2029, and those companies have already got a fully flying aircraft that's maybe making overwater flights, and how that, might, are they pieces on this aircraft that could be, adapted or appended onto the now existing supersonic aircraft fleet? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of the technologies that are being developed and will be demonstrated with the X-59, all that is being shared with industry for their application in use in developing a supersonic aircraft. Don't have a lot of the specifics on the existing companies like Boom or others, whether their aircraft are intended to be something that generates a quiet sonic thump that can fly over land, or is it designed under conventional technology where it would be limited to overwater flight? So I think the difference in capabilities is there, but the technologies that X-59 will demonstrate for quiet sonic booms will be shared with industry for their application to designing a quiet supersonic aircraft. How they choose to implement it is going to be depends on what they're looking for, what they would like to design and build.
Thank you. Other public comments, Diane?
Yes, there's one more on Zoom, Ms. Darlene Yapley.
Ms. Yapley, okay, the floor is yours. You want to reset the clock, please? There you go. Thank you, Ms. Yapley, the floor is yours. Can we unmute her?
Yes, we can hear you.
We cannot hear you. Does she have to unmute, or do we need to?
Ms. Yapley is unmuted, yes.
Just real quiet.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very softly.
Sorry, the clock isn't moving, but I'm going to keep talking. Community response testing is different than other scales, and I think you're aware that the neighborhood environmental survey showed that people were more annoyed at every level of noise compared to the previous Schultz curve. So I'm interested in knowing, what are you incorporating or considering in your noise metrics given what has been found with the new national curve? And the second is cumulative noise. You're here at the Roundtable because people have noise problems, and add on this extra layer, is that going to be considered in terms of people's total impact versus you only look at each layer as a different impact? Thank you.
Okay, well, your second question, I guess, we are going to be looking at the responses to single events, and also cumulatively, like end of the day surveys of what we think they're, in terms of cumulatively what they think, what that cumulative exposure was. Relative to the FAA, NES, I think one thing to point out again, it's a different type of noise and again a different scale, and so it's not direct correlation, but that's one of the reasons for gathering this data, is to see what's considered noticeable and what's not. Wish I could give you more details specifically on that. I'm not completely familiar. That's not my area of expertise of what was done on that NES and in terms of the survey analysis that was used there. But we are looking at several different metrics and sharing all of those different metrics with the regulators for their use in determining which ones might be appropriate to apply for a regulation.
Thank you. Are there other public comments?
There are no other public comments at this time.
Okay, and I see none in chambers. We'll close the public comment on item number 8 and bring it back to the membership. Any final comments or questions with respect to the presentation? Member Hindi.
Just point of clarification, and I think I know the answer, but when you're referring to regulator, you're talking about, in the United States at least, the FAA.
Yeah, we're talking about,
Okay.
we're sharing with regulators, both the FAA, and we're sharing it with, ICAO, and then,
Okay, thank you.
that conversation to share with other regulators.
Great, thank you. Okay, hearing none, Mr. Shaw, I want to thank you again for taking time, particularly being on the East Coast, to join us tonight and to share with us what is going on at NASA with the Quests program around the Supersonic initiative. Very informative. Obviously, from our perspective, it does raise concerns as well as opportunities, but we're also cognizant, making fact that we understand exactly what is going on, when it's going on, and what impact it might have. And we appreciate the fact that as you do your studies, you take into account some of the studies and metrics and comments that have been made with respect to the noise on normal aircraft and how that might impact this program. And I trust that before any commercial aircraft will be authorized in this country, it will be governed and approved by standards that will be set based on some of the studies you're doing. So I just want to make that comment. Are there any other comments? If not, sir, we thank you again. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. We all enjoyed it.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 9. We only have a couple items left. We will try to keep close to schedule here, or getting us out of it before it's too late. The next item on the agenda is item number 9, a presentation. On page 50 of your packet, you will find a PowerPoint document containing a list of sections on the FAA reauthorization bill that might be of interest to you. This is a, I think if I remember correctly, it's a 400-page bill, and it was just enacted here about a month ago. We've not had a chance to go through it in detail, but we did want to take an opportunity tonight to at least give you a 20,000-foot summary of it. It will be discussed in detail at the Legislative Subcommittee at the end of July, and welcome you to attend that, and we'll report back to you at our August meeting. So with that, we've asked our consultant, Gene Rendell, to maybe provide a quick overview. So Gene, we'll turn the floor over to you.
I want to put it in present, there you go. So as has been said by the FAA earlier, we do have a Reauthorization Act of 2024. It was signed into law, which provides authorization for the next almost 5 years. Next slide. And goes through 2028. There were 29 provisions in the bill that I thought would be of interest to this membership, being focused on aircraft noise, aviation noise, community involvement, those sorts of things. I'm only highlighting 3 of those provisions tonight. Hopefully I give you some information to be intrigued enough to go look at the bill or get involved with the legislative subcommittee here to really find out when we really look into the nitty-gritty of what we believe is in the bill. So the 3 here are reducing community aircraft noise exposure, aircraft noise advisory committee, and community collaboration program. All of these are kind of new and ideas that I think were, some came from bodies like this, that, the communities have been begging for more collaboration, more involvement, more earlier to be put into the process, those sorts of things. So some of that has made it into the bill. Next slide. So what each of these slides is showing is what the title and the description of the section for each of the provisions, a brief description, and then our take on what we believe is the expected outcome from the measures. So in the first one here, with community aircraft noise exposure, consider consensus community recommendations to flight procedures. We've spent a lot of time in this roundtable over the last 5 years looking at flight procedures. So now this is asking for consideration of community recommendations for those procedures that can mitigate aircraft noise, work with airport sponsors and neighboring communities, and then collaborate with local governments to discourage infill development around airports to help protect the asset of the airport. So basically, the expected outcome of this measure is collaboration with airports and communities on the development of flight procedures. Next slide. So for this one, the aircraft noise just committee, advisory committee, I believe. It's a committee comprised of manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, air carriers, higher education, and airport communities. And again, airport communities is part of that advisory committee that evaluate ongoing aviation noise-related research. And the committee shall issue a report to Congress and brief Congress and consult with NASA and other federal agencies. For this one, the expected outcome is a structured collaboration with a final report to Congress, building on progress from the Neighborhood Environmental Survey and Noise Policy Review that the FAA is currently undertaking. Next slide, and the last one for tonight. So this one is to update internal FAA guidance on community engagement. There is FAA already has a policy for, or a handbook for community engagement. You can find it on their website, relatively easy if you go in and type in FAA Community Engagement. It implements funding of GAO report, and the expected outcome is updated guidance based on the General Accounting Office report, which includes noise metrics. So, and I know noise metrics has been also something that this membership has been focused on over the last few years, and so that's why I wanted to bring this one up too, is that noise metrics is included in one of these, and others, not just this one. Anyway, there are several provisions. Look forward to having the real deep dive into some of these more in the next legislative subcommittee, which I believe is later this summer in July.
Thank you, Mr. Randall. Let's take it back to the members for any comments. Just a couple overall comments before. Again, this was the FAA reauthorization is done every 5 years. We have a number of new members, so just a quick overview. It's done every 5 years. The FAA is the authority for the controlling aircraft, the flights in the air or on the ground. They have exclusive authority over it. So these reauthorization acts are very important. They provide the guidance as well as the funding of the FAA. And what is in there is a collaboration and accumulation of information gathered over the years from different bodies like ours who submitted comments with respect to what we thought should be in it and should not be in it, as well as a number of community groups. All of that has been consolidated, has been reviewed, assessed, evaluated, and put into this FAA reauthorization. Some of which we had lobbied for, made it in. Much of it did not, but it is now the guidance for the next 5 years. There were parts of it, and I've only scanned it briefly, that I thought were very encouraging. But underlying all of it is much of it yet to be determined how it's executed. So while some broad outlines are laid out, how it's actually executed and implemented remains to be seen. There are other parts of it that did not get it in and that will continue to provide comments with respect to lobbying for that. I would urge you, if you have an interest in this, attend our subcommittee meeting at the end of July when we talk about this in more detail, and you'll provide a greater update. So with that overview, let's take it to member comments. Member Ford.
Hi, thank you, Gene. I see a conflict between the Airport Land Use Committee and the idea that you shouldn't infill housing around airports, because that's what we deal with every time, that they're trying to build more houses right around airports or childcare centers, and it's in direct conflict. So I don't know what we're going to do about it. I'm just going to mention it because we deal with it every time we have the Airport Land Use Committee meeting. So it's kind of disheartening. Maybe somebody should tell the governor.
By the way, if I can add a comment there is clearly a tension existing between the need for additional affordable housing and the scarcity of land on the peninsula that is close to the airport, and there's that tension. The commission, the Roundtable, has taken positions that we do not dictate to communities what they can and cannot do, but we do advise them of some of the consequences of their actions. But it's up to every community to determine where and how and when they place their housing. But you can see the conflict that might arise. And what I think you're alluding to, Member Ford, is a comment in the report that urges communities not to build housing near airports. So there's a conflict. You're exactly right. Other comments? Member O'Donnell.
Just wanted to say that the slides that were presented on the screen are not in our packet, the printed packet.
Correct.
And so, can you give a brief highlight of the sections that you talked about? Because I couldn't read the screen and I turned off my Zoom.
Okay.
Just the numbers that are on my...
Yes. The presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put them online tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's all there, so you will get it. We just didn't have it ready for put in the packet, so.
No worries, I was just looking and couldn't find it.
Right. For those on Zoom, the slides are not in the packet. They'll be put on online tomorrow. So the slides presented tonight by Gene will be there, okay? And by the way, I might add that there's, if you look at the airport noise report, there's some great discussions and analysis of this in their most recent editions, including a summary of the report from the Community Alliance comments on this as well. And so I'd urge you to review those as well. They're very informative. Are there other comments from members?
Real quick, I
Yes,
could.
please.
Tim told me, Tim's online helping me today, the section numbers were 787, 792, and 793. Thanks, Tim.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none from the members, any members on Zoom that wish to comment? Do we have any hands from members?
Yes, we have Ms. Darlene Yapley.
We'll take public comment in a minute,
sorry.
but any members on Zoom?
None on Zoom, no
Okay.
members on.
We're going to defer the public comment on this until we get all the presentations done. I think there's only one more left, and then we'll come back to public comments on all the presentations except number 8, in which we've already taken public comments. So with that, hearing no further comments on this from the members, we'll move to item number 10, which is the subcommittee updates. We'll make this brief. I've already reported on the work plan subcommittee, so nothing to be said there. It's already been reported upon. And on the other subcommittees, they have not met since the last roundtable, so I don't believe there's any reports. But Sam is chair of the TWG, nothing, and Terry is chair of GDB, anything? Nothing. Okay, so with that, we'll move, yes. That was me? Okay. Okay, so presentations are not complete except for public comment. So let's move to public comment on any of the presentations, excluding presentation number 8, which we've taken, and that was with respect to the report on supersonic aircraft. Do we have any hands raised?
Yes, we have Ms. Darlene Yapley.
Yes, Ms. Yapley, welcome. We'll open up the floor. It's yours.
Am I getting an unmute?
You are unmuted.
Okay,
There you are. Yep.
I have a heads-up question for FAA Community Engagement Officer, Ms. Chin, and this could possibly be addressed at the meeting that's going to be held late July for the subcommittee. But many of the items that Mr. Rindell covered, 792, 793, there's a lot of conversation about including the community, getting input from the community, airport communities, feedback, interviews, etc. And I think in order to make it a good provision versus a not so good provision, a lot will depend on how the FAA actually does include, for example, the roundtable. So if there could be any comment that you could make at the late July meeting on any of the provisions, I'm happy to give you a list, but there's a select number, and Jean covered 2 of them today, that really are about community engagement. And if that could be clarified, how the roundtable in some cases could be giving such input for that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yappy. We will make a note and make sure we have a discussion on that at the subcommittee, legislative subcommittee. Okay, are there other comments? Yes, on chambers we have a comment. Oh, I'm sorry? Ms. Chen, did you have a comment?
Well, it'd be easier, it's hard to hear you when you touch the mic.
Oh, sorry.
I just can't hear you very well, it gets garbled. And any public questions and requests need to really go through the roundtable, and then they will send it to us that way. That is the correct process.
Yes, and I think any comments, excuse me, will come from the at the subcommittee meeting, and after the subcommittee meeting, we'll then determine if there's any questions or comments we'll need to make. But I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Is this correct here? Okay, we have a public comment in chambers.
Hello again, Ramey Tan, a resident of Pacifica. I had a comment on item number 6A regarding Bert's updated report. And just regarding the soundproofing program, I'm wondering if that will be expanded, given that there's more overflights in, coming out of SFO, and the airport's ever expanding the number of flights, and that also affects daytime exposure to the aircraft noise. And then I also have a comment on item number 9, and just again, kind of echo what the previous commenter said about all the building and housing pressure in the areas around the airports, in the urban areas. And I'm just wondering if the FAA and Roundtable and other government agencies are looking at actually doing what many Asian cities have done, like Hong Kong has moved its airport away from the city because it was so close and causing a lot of safety and noise issues. So it's all the way out on one of the islands, and they actually put it over water, all the runways. And I believe Singapore did the same thing. I think they got now 3 runways, all completely over water as well. So that's a big infrastructure ask, but then at the same time, it frees up a lot of land area to build even more housing on. So that sale of the old airport land can pay for the new airport potentially. So also had a question on what items did not make it into the reauthorization, and maybe the chair or somebody on the roundtable membership could answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments before we come back to address those?
No, there's none on Zoom or in chambers. Thank you.
Okay. With that, with respect to the question on insulation, Bert, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to. So with regards to the noise insulation program, as the aircraft noise level increases, SFO is observing that and will be following the federal standards. If it goes up by 1.5 decibels, we'll then be watching it. If it continues, we'll then be adjusting noise contours. We're also looking at the need for possible new contours based on the age of the current contours. And so I would predict within the next couple of years, we'll do a new set of contours.
Great. Thank you. With respect to your comment on moving airports, not sure we can respond to that, but it's been noted, and I'm sure Doug is taking a comment. Housing pressure, we already talked about that. There's a tension there. The tension's been noted, I'm sure, in Sacramento. If not, it will be noted, has been noted, I'm sure. But that may be beyond the scope of our authority, but appreciate your comments. And with respect to the comment made by Ms. Yapley, again, we will address that at the Legislative Subcommittee. I do think that community engagement is a critical part of the execution of any of these authorizations right here. So that will, I'm sure, be discussed. Any member wish to share any additional comments on that? Okay. Hearing none, we'll close public comment on the public presentations. The second to last item on the agenda is any member and subcommittee communications or announcements. Anything any member would like to share with respect to any comments, questions, community activities? Seeing none, we'll move to the last item on the agenda, which will bring great cheer to many people, and that we are adjourned. Thank you. Appreciate you all being here. Thank you.
Yeah. The partnership with Lockheed. So my cousin worked with Lockheed on that.
Done. Let's do this again.
This is Lockheed's 40 passenger plane based on the same design. I knew I remembered.